There are seasons in life when separation feels permanent. When what was once whole has been broken, scattered, and seems beyond repair. You may look at your situation and say, "There's no way this can come back together." But I want you to understand something. What God separates, He separates to sanctify, and what He sanctifies, He brings back stronger. Separation is often divine preparation for restoration. When God allows distance between people, purposes, or seasons, it is rarely to destroy but to develop. Many times, we misinterpret the silence and separation as rejection, but in the language of heaven, it often means preparation. God will never bring you into something permanent without first proving you in something temporary. The space between what was and what will be is where God molds your spirit, shapes your character, and redefines your priorities. When God wants to restore something, He first removes the impurities that would destroy it again. Separation becomes the furnace where motives are purified, and hearts are softened. When you are separated from someone or something you value, God uses that season to test what you've truly learned. Can you trust His plan when you cannot trace His hand? Can you love without possession, believe without sight, and hope without control? That's what divine separation is about, learning dependency on God more than on what was lost. Many times, the very thing you prayed to keep had to leave so that you could mature into the version of yourself that could sustain it when it returns. God never wastes separation. He invests in it. In the wilderness seasons of your life, when connections fade and doors close, God is quietly preparing your environment for restoration. The people involved are not idle either. God is working on both sides. He is healing hearts, maturing perspectives, and softening pride. Restoration cannot happen where pride still reigns. That's why sometimes He lets time do the healing that words could never accomplish. You may not see what He's doing, but that doesn't mean He's doing nothing. God works in the unseen, and separation gives Him the canvas to paint your next season without interference. In divine separation, your heart learns to depend on His voice more than your emotions. You start hearing differently, seeing differently, and valuing differently. The distance gives you clarity. What was once confusing becomes clear. What was once painful becomes purposeful. That's the secret of divine preparation. It changes your vision. What you thought you lost, God was actually repositioning. The space between you and what you loved was not punishment. It was preparation for a purer, stronger, and more mature connection. When you understand that separation is part of God's process, you stop fighting it and start growing through it. You stop asking, "Why?" and begin asking, "What are you teaching me, Lord?" It's in this question that revelation is born. Every divine restoration story in Scripture begins with a season of separation. Joseph was separated before reunion. David was hidden before enthronement, and even Jesus withdrew before His resurrection. God's pattern has never changed. Before He brings together, He sets apart. Before He restores, He refines. Before He reunites, He rebuilds within. God sanctifies before He reunites. When He separates people, places, or relationships, His goal is not division, it is purification. Sanctification is the process of cleansing the heart from the residue of pain, pride, and past mistakes. It is God's way of ensuring that when He brings something back together, it will not collapse under the same weight that once broke it. God will never join what He has not first cleansed. He takes time to purify motives, refine intentions, and renew minds so that the reunion becomes purposeful instead of problematic. Many cry for restoration while still carrying the very attitudes that caused the separation, but God in His mercy delays the reunion until hearts are ready to handle it correctly. When God sanctifies, He exposes what must be removed. The sanctification process reveals hidden wounds, unspoken offenses, and unhealed emotions that must be surrendered before restoration can happen. Sometimes He will isolate you, not to punish you, but to detox your spirit from the influences that distorted your perspective. You begin to see yourself and others differently when you go through divine cleansing. You start realizing that forgiveness is not an emotion but an act of obedience. The sanctifying work of God breaks the hold of bitterness so that love can flow freely again. He will not bring two people back together when both are still chained to the pain of the past. Sanctification also means alignment with His will. God cannot unite what is still out of order. He must first bring each heart into agreement with His divine plan. That's why during separation, He speaks to each person individually, shaping them according to His design. He may deal with your patience while He works on the other person's humility. He may strengthen your faith while softening their heart. Each process is sacred, because sanctification ensures that when reunion comes, both sides carry grace instead of guilt. The sanctifying season can be lonely because God removes every distraction that competes with His voice. It is a time when you are forced to face yourself and allow God to correct what life's pain distorted. In this place, you rediscover your true identity, not defined by relationships or failures but by divine purpose. God cleanses your heart so that you no longer seek reunion for validation but for destiny fulfillment. He changes your reason for wanting restoration, from desperation to divine alignment. When sanctification is complete, peace replaces anxiety. You stop forcing what God intends to form naturally. You stop chasing what is meant to return in its season. That's how you know God's work within you is almost done. You no longer seek out of fear but wait out of faith. And when the time comes for reunion, you will recognize it, not by emotion, but by divine confirmation, because sanctified hearts attract sanctified connections. The coming reunion is about purpose, not nostalgia. When God speaks of bringing people, relationships, or callings back together, He does not move according to emotion but according to divine intention. Nostalgia makes you long for what was, purpose prepares you for what will be. God's goal in restoration is never to relive the past but to fulfill the promise. Many times, what once was comfortable cannot exist in the same form because the season has changed. God brings people together again only when their individual growth aligns with His greater plan. The reunion is not about revisiting old memories, it's about stepping into a new mandate that requires unity, understanding, and spiritual maturity. When God restores, He doesn't repeat. He multiplies. The reunion carries a greater weight because it is birthed from revelation, not emotion. Both sides have walked through seasons of separation that refined their faith and purified their motives. What once broke apart from immaturity or misunderstanding now stands as a testimony of transformation. God never intends for restoration to simply satisfy your heart, He intends for it to advance His kingdom. When He brings something back, it's because there's an assignment attached to it. The pain of separation prepared both sides for a divine collaboration that can now carry the glory He intended from the beginning. Nostalgia looks backward, but purpose looks forward. Nostalgia wants to feel what it once felt, purpose wants to fulfill what was once promised. This is why God had to separate you before reuniting you, so that you could release your emotional attachment to the old version of the relationship and embrace the divine reason for its return. What God is doing now is not a replay but a relaunch. He's creating something that can stand the storms, something that glorifies Him and not human desire. Purpose-driven reunion requires maturity. It demands that both hearts understand timing, communication, and spiritual responsibility. You cannot enter a divine reunion still carrying the same insecurities that caused division before. Purpose requires strength, patience, and wisdom, because what God joins again will now carry impact beyond personal satisfaction. It will influence others, inspire faith, and reveal His faithfulness. This is why God had to wait until both sides could handle the weight of destiny before bringing them back together. When you step into a purpose-filled reunion, you feel a different kind of peace. It is not driven by excitement or fear but by divine assurance. You sense that this time, it's not about who was right or wrong, it's about what God is about to do through both of you. The reunion becomes a vessel of testimony, not a recreation of the past. It is proof that God can take broken pieces and build a masterpiece. It's not about restoring comfort, it's about restoring calling. It's not about rekindling feelings, it's about reigniting purpose. Divine timing governs every reconnection. Nothing in God's plan happens by coincidence or human control. Every separation, every delay, every closed door, and every silence has a divine schedule attached to it. When God is orchestrating restoration, He aligns moments, hearts, and circumstances in ways that cannot be manipulated. You may want the reunion now, but God knows that premature connection can destroy what maturity would sustain. Timing is not just about when something happens, it's about when both sides are ready for what's meant to happen. God's timing protects destiny from emotional interruption. There are moments when God seems to be delaying what you know He promised, but delay in the kingdom is not denial, it's divine alignment. God allows time to heal what words cannot, to shape what pain once distorted, and to prepare both people for the weight of what's coming. You cannot rush what God is still refining. Every divine reunion requires spiritual synchronization. If one heart moves ahead of the other, the balance breaks. God waits until both sides have walked through their individual process so that when they come back together, they meet not as who they were but as who they've become. Divine timing teaches patience and trust. It confronts your desire for control and forces you to surrender to the unseen hand of God. You begin to understand that what He is doing behind the scenes is far greater than what you can see in the moment. Every delay builds endurance, every silence builds sensitivity, and every disappointment builds discernment. The waiting season is not wasted time, it's where God is arranging the perfect moment of convergence. Sometimes, divine timing requires that God rearrange environments and even remove certain people so that the reunion happens in the right atmosphere. God knows that the soil of your surroundings affects the growth of what He plants. He will shift careers, locations, or relationships just to ensure the connection flourishes in purity and peace. What feels like chaos is often God setting the stage for restoration. He is weaving details that seem disconnected into a tapestry of divine order. When divine timing manifests, everything flows effortlessly. Conversations feel led, peace replaces anxiety, and divine confirmation becomes undeniable. You realize that what once didn't work suddenly makes sense. The doors that were once closed open with favor, and the opportunities that seemed lost reappear at the perfect moment. That's the evidence of divine orchestration. God never rushes because He knows that purpose cannot mature under pressure. When He says it's time, no force in hell or on earth can delay it any longer. The reunion doesn't come from human pursuit but from heaven's command. It arrives at the moment when hearts, circumstances, and destiny all align under the authority of divine timing. Transformation must precede restoration. Before God can bring anything or anyone back into your life, He ensures that both sides have been changed from the inside out. True restoration is not about returning to what was but about becoming who you were meant to be. Transformation is the divine preparation that ensures the new season will not collapse under the weight of the old patterns. God will never rebuild on the same foundation that once broke. He transforms the heart, renews the mind, and reshapes the perspective before He restores the connection. Without transformation, restoration becomes repetition, and God does not repeat cycles, He redeems them. Transformation begins in the secret places of surrender. It's where you confront your habits, your fears, your ego, and your brokenness. It's where God strips away the parts of you that can't go into the next season. He deals with your impatience, your pride, your defensiveness, and your need to control outcomes. Transformation hurts because it exposes everything you tried to hide, but it heals because it replaces what was false with what is real. God cannot restore what you pretend to be. He can only restore what you allow Him to change. That's why the transformation process feels lonely and confusing. It's the breaking down of the old version of you to make room for the version that can handle divine restoration. Many pray for reunion while resisting transformation, but God will never unite two unhealed hearts. He first changes the nature of your desires. You begin to want different things, not revenge, not validation, but peace and purpose. Transformation shifts your focus from what you lost to what God is building. It gives you the maturity to handle restoration with grace instead of pride. God waits until both hearts have learned humility, forgiveness, and self-control before He allows the paths to cross again. He knows that an untransformed heart will turn blessing into burden. The evidence of transformation is not in your words but in your reactions. When you can remember the pain and no longer feel bitterness, when you can face the past without fear, when you can pray for the one who hurt you and truly mean it, transformation has taken root. God uses that inner renewal as the foundation for restoration. Because now, when He brings things back together, they are anchored in spiritual growth rather than emotional need. The reunion will no longer be about fulfilling emptiness but about fulfilling destiny. Transformation also prepares you to recognize the difference between what is familiar and what is divinely assigned. The new version of you will not chase what once drained you, you will discern whether it's time to reconnect or release. God transforms so that you can step into restoration with wisdom. When the process is complete, the connection that returns will reflect the change within you. It will be healthier, stronger, and rooted in divine order rather than broken emotion. The reunion will reveal God's faithfulness, not just reconcile hearts. When God restores what was broken, His purpose extends beyond human emotion. He wants the world to see His power through your story. The reunion becomes a testimony of His promises kept, His timing perfected, and His grace made visible. It's not just about two hearts finding each other again, it's about heaven showing that nothing surrendered to God ever stays lost. What He rebuilds carries the mark of His glory. The reunion is a public display of what He has been doing privately all along. God's faithfulness is revealed in the details. The way doors open at the right moment, the way peace fills what used to feel like pain, the way the connection flows without striving, all of it bears His signature. When God restores, He leaves no question about who orchestrated it. Every moment of waiting, every season of silence, every tear shed becomes a part of the testimony. The same people who saw you broken will now see you blessed, and they will know it was the hand of God. What seemed like delay was actually divine choreography. When hearts are reconciled under God's guidance, they carry a deeper reverence for His ways. You begin to realize that He was never late, He was always preparing the perfect moment to prove His loyalty. The reunion isn't just a reward, it's a revelation. It shows that God remembers His word even when you forget your strength. It's in that moment you see that faith wasn't wasted and prayers weren't ignored. God's faithfulness means He doesn't just restore what was lost, He multiplies it. What returns comes back richer in love, deeper in purpose, and stronger in spirit. This kind of restoration brings glory beyond emotion. It shifts the focus from human reconciliation to divine manifestation. The world looks at what was once broken and sees evidence of God's goodness. You become a living testimony of what happens when people wait on the Lord instead of forcing outcomes. The reunion becomes a stage where grace performs its masterpiece. It tells others that if God did it for you, He can do it for them. When God brings things back together, He always adds a layer of blessing that couldn't exist before. You will sense divine peace overshadowing the connection. There will be a supernatural ease because it's no longer powered by human will but by divine promise. The love, trust, and unity that emerge will bear the fruit of spiritual maturity. The reunion becomes a reminder that even in the seasons of separation, God was faithful. Every delay had meaning, every silence had purpose, and every distance was designed to magnify His glory. In the end, it will not be about what you lost or regained, but about how faithfully God kept His word through it all.